I'm David Arsen. I'm a professor of education policy at Michigan State University, and I'm going to take this opportunity to share a few observations on legislative activity directed to Detroit Public Schools. The district now has about $515 million of debt on their operating budget. And to pay that off on an annual basis takes about $1,100 per pupil per year. It's just crippling for the district. It's taking money from the classroom, from the teacher salaries, from all kinds of instructional activities. The budget of the district would be just about balanced in the absence of having to pay these, cover this debt. So that has to be addressed, and it also has to be addressed because more immediately, the district has run out of money and will default without a state solution. The plan is for there to be a restructuring of the district to establish what is sometimes called an old co, new co. The outstanding debt will stay with an administrative structure called the old co district, and there'll be establishment of a new district, the new co, that will be responsible for educating kids in Detroit. The money necessary to fund this will not come out of the school aid fund. It will not negatively impact children in other districts in Michigan. It will be funded from funds from the tobacco settlement funds. Well, why not just let it go bankrupt, as it was the case in the municipality? My answer to that is the same one as all the serious financial experts have looked at this, and Treasury and so forth, is that it would just cost a lot more money for the state. As opposed to about $500 million, a bankruptcy for the school district would cost the state about $2 billion, and it'd have a lot of uncertainty about the legal arrangements and the settlements going forward. So that has just been an option that few people want to pursue. Why didn't emergency management work to reduce the DPS debt? We have a spectacular, clear case where it did not work here in Detroit. State policymakers looked at the financial problems in Detroit and other urban districts as one of misguided local leadership, whether the board or the school administrators, seeing the solution as being necessary, the necessary solution as putting in place fully empowered administrators who would cut through the politics and make the decisions that needed to be made. But the emergency management in Detroit failed on both financial and academic grounds. In Michigan, we have a funding system where all the revenue follows the children. The underlying problem for Detroit public schools was the declining enrollment. And when the children left, money left, and even though the emergency managers were willing and able to make substantial cuts, closing over 100 schools, cutting salaries, cutting programs, doing so also came along with the loss of students, mostly to charters and other districts out of district. And the revenues fell faster than the costs. That's where the deficit occurred, and that's where they had to borrow, and it's a death spiral that they fell into. The emergency management law is really remarkably weak as an instrument of academic accountability. It has no provisions for improvement of academics. It's just about finances. And so we really need a policy that takes academics and student learning more seriously. Under the current plans, there will be a return to local control for DPS. I think that's a very good thing. There will be an elected board in DPS. And I think we're at a point now where we can see clearly, both from the sentiment of Detroiters and folks around the state, that we need local input in our public schools, especially in urban areas. We need the parents, the communities, and teachers to be engaged in the decision making, and that's a positive thing that should come out of this. As I talk now, a provision that is still up in the air. In my view, it is important for the long-term future of Detroit Public Schools, but it's a controversial one, and it's unclear whether it will move through. and it goes under the name of the Detroit Education Commission. This would be a new entity, a new governance entity with some authority, limited authority, over both the DPS, the Detroit Public School District, and also the charter schools that operate in the city. The DEC would have to assume some of the responsibilities that are taken on by most districts. Right? It would be atop a system that has lots of choice. Individual schools, especially the charters, would still have a charter authorizer. They would have the power to design their school curriculum model. They're doing their hiring and so forth. Lots of choice, but the role of the DEC would be to do things like what neighborhoods, where do we need buildings, where do we put them in, and to establish some criteria, some performance and accountability criteria for all schools that operate in Detroit. That's about as far as the current discussion has gone, because even just getting that far is a big step. Looking further down the road, it's easy for people to see that this kind of entity could take on other responsibilities. It could establish a common application system that applied to students in both the district schools and the charter schools. It could supervise a more equitable access to special education services, provide transportation, which is a huge problem in Detroit, and coordinate early childhood education, just a host of things. So in my view, choice is good. That's not at risk in Detroit. It's rather a set of administrative structures that make it more efficient and equitable. And I think the DEC is the first step in trying to reach that objective. The first thing, of course, is it depends on what's passed. It won't be perfect for anybody. It has to be a compromise. I just say in passing that, I have to commend the legislature, because this has brought on some really careful deliberation. People are listening in a way that hasn't always been the case around education policy issues. The EAA, the emergency management law, those were just pushed through quickly. And this is a moment where what we're seeing is different, and I think that's state government is doing what it should be doing. But in the end, it will depend on what's passed. It will be important that whatever plan comes through stabilizes DPS enrollment. If DPS enrollment continues to decline, the debt will reemerge. Okay, so that's a key element. It's a first step. There are a lot of details to be worked out. It will require patience and dedicated effort. It will need other changes in state school finance and school choice policies, okay, to really make it reach its potential. And all of this is just to establish a foundation, right? The financial the governance foundation, for the hugely important and challenging work that is left to be done in teaching and learning. There's large repairs that have to be done here. Class size has to be reduced, the restoration of programs that have been cut, repaying teachers for the loans that they have made to the district. They haven't had an increase in 5 years in pay. The kids have lost opportunities, but programs have been cut in arts and music and physical education. All these things are hugely important. It's important to get to where we need to go, not only for Detroit, but as a state. It's important for citizens of goodwill throughout Michigan who understand that their own public schools are now powerfully shaped by policies in Lansing, who regret the divisions that have separated Detroiters from the rest of the state for so long, step forward and say they will support policies for the children of Detroit that they themselves would want for their own children.